The giant factory floor hummed with the sound of machinery, but the biggest machine at the center sat dead silent. Around it, 10 engineers in crisp shirts and helmets gathered with tense faces, flipping through manuals and staring at diagrams. Pinned to a whiteboard cluttered with messy equations and scribbled notes. Tools were scattered everywhere, wrenches, pliers, meters that blinked error codes. A harsh fluorescent light flickered overhead. Adding to the strained mood, the floor manager, wearing a bright safety vest and holding a clipboard, barked at them, "We are already 2 weeks behind. Do you realize how much this is costing us? Every hour it sits dead." His voice echoed through the cavernous hall, drawing stares from workers passing by. One engineer, sweating, tried to explain, "Sir, the calibration data doesn't match we can't get the valve array to synchronize." Another shook his head. "We've reset the system twice. We replaced the fuses. It won't start." They were clearly out of ideas. Tension rose as they argued, voices overlapping. "You didn't tighten that coupling enough." "No, it's the circuit board, it's fried. It was working yesterday, someone messed with it overnight." The manager slammed his clipboard on a workbench. "Enough! This is supposed to be a design, and 10 of the best engineers can't get it to turn on." Silence fell, except for the buzzing of distant conveyor belts. The engineers looked at one another with embarrassment and quiet resentment. One of them muttered under his breath, "Maybe we need to call the manufacturer." Another shot back angrily, "And admit we can't fix our own machine." In that tense circle, stress and pride clashed. No one wanted to be blamed. No one had a solution. The giant machine, gleaming with polished steel and high-tech control panels, sat there like a monument to their collective failure. Just outside the factory's restricted zone, in a dimly lit corridor lined with cleaning supplies and tool cabinets, a woman in her late 40s quietly pushed a mop bucket forward. Dressed in a faded blue uniform, with sleeves rolled up and hair tied back in a simple bun, she moved unnoticed, just another janitor doing her job. Her hands were worn, calloused from years of hard work, and her eyes observant, missing nothing. As she reached near the main hall, she heard raised voices, urgent, frustrated, and overlapping. She paused and glanced through the large glass window into the engineering bay. 10 men huddled around a massive machine, clearly agitated. Charts, laptops, and wires were everywhere, and the tension was so thick she could feel it even from outside. One engineer slammed a wrench down. "Nothing is working. This design is flawed." Another replied, "No, we're missing something obvious." The woman tilted her head, watching closely. Her expression remained calm but curious. She leaned slightly into the doorway, hesitant but intrigued. Suddenly, the factory manager spotted her and barked, "Hey! This area's off-limits to janitorial staff. Please move along." She nodded respectfully. "I'm sorry, sir. I just overheard. If it's all right, could I take a look? Sometimes a fresh pair of eyes sees something others miss." The room fell into stunned silence. The engineers turned to stare at her, some with disbelief, others with smirks tugging at their lips. One of them chuckled under his breath. "With all due respect, ma'am, this isn't a leaking pipe in a janitor's closet. This is high-level tech." But she didn't back down. Her voice was soft but steady. "I helped my late husband fix engines on old farm machines. Sometimes, machines break for simple reasons, and no manual can tell you where to look." Another engineer rolled his eyes. "We've run diagnostics 3 times. This machine isn't a tractor." Still, the manager looked at her, half annoyed, half curious. "You seriously think you can do what 10 engineers couldn't?" She smiled politely. "I don't know, but it doesn't hurt to look, does it?" The room exchanged uncertain glances. Pride held some back, but frustration pushed others to consider it. The manager finally gestured. "All right then, 5 minutes, don't touch anything." She stepped in quietly, wiping her hands on a rag, and approached the machine not with arrogance, but with the calm of someone who listens before they act. The engineers moved aside, some scoffing, some watching curiously. As the simple woman leaned in, ready to observe what the experts had missed, she moved slowly around the hulking machine, eyes scanning every detail with surprising focus. The engineers watched, arms crossed, eyebrows raised in amused skepticism. One of them whispered, "This is a waste of time." but no one dared say it louder. Asterisk, she bent slightly, examining a cluster of pipes and valves. Her fingers hovered just above them, careful not to violate the manager's warning about touching anything. She pointed with a steady hand. Asterisk, why is this pipe loose here? She asked quietly. Asterisk, an engineer leaned over to look, frowning. That's normal play for thermal expansion. Asterisk, she nodded, but didn't seem convinced. She moved around to the rear, where wiring harnesses were bundled in color-coded sleeves. She traced the lines with her eyes, noticing where one connector didn't quite snap flush. Asterisk, excuse me, she said gently to the youngest engineer who had been closest. Is this supposed to be seated like that? Asterisk, he blinked, startled. Oh, well, it should click fully, but the tolerance is tight. Asterisk, she watched him sheepishly push it the final millimeter until it clicked. She smiled faintly. That might help. The room fell silent for a beat. She straightened up and turned to the main valve assembly at the machine's heart. She squinted, then pointed at a small, overlooked valve that was rotated almost but not quite all the way. Asterisk, may I? She asked, eyes on the manager. Asterisk, the manager, half exasperated, waved a hand. Fine, do what you need. Asterisk, she gently twisted the valve with practiced hands until it lined up perfectly. A subtle click echoed through the assembly. Asterisk, the engineers exchanged looks. One of them rubbed his chin, his arrogance fading. Asterisk, she wiped her palms on her uniform and took a step back. There, she said softly, with no fanfare. Asterisk, one of the engineers snapped. That can't be it. That's too simple. Asterisk, she met his eyes calmly. Sometimes the simple things break machines. My husband always said to check for what you assume is right. Asterisk, she gestured to the main control panel. Try it now. Asterisk, there was hesitation in the air, like no one wanted to be proven wrong. But the manager, tired of the delay, barked, do it! Asterisk, the youngest engineer swallowed hard and stepped forward to flip the master switch. Asterisk, a low hum began to grow. Lights along the control panel blinked from red to green. The once silent machine shuddered, then spun to life with a smooth, healthy rhythm that filled the factory with its power. Asterisk, the woman just watched quietly, hands clasped as the room erupted. In startled gasps and wide-eyed stares. Asterisk, the moment the switch was thrown. The machine gave a deep, resonant hum that rolled through the cavernous hall like distant thunder. Every blinking red light on its control panel flipped to green in neat sequence. One after another. Click, 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 like dominoes falling in perfect order. Asterisk, steam hissed softly from pressure valves in exactly the right places. Gauges that had stubbornly refused to stabilize for days slid smoothly into the green zone. Motors whirred up to speed in unison, their sound harmonizing into a powerful, healthy purr that filled the bay with energy. Asterisk, for a split second, no one moved. 10 engineers, the floor manager, even a few nearby workers who'd been pretending not to watch, they all froze. The factory, usually so noisy, seemed eerily quiet, except for the machine finally doing what it was built to do. Asterisk, one of the older engineers blinked rapidly and muttered, barely audible, no way. Another let out a strangled laugh, unable to believe it. Asterisk, the floor manager's jaw worked up and down without words for a moment, eyes darting between the humming machine and the woman who still stood quietly with her hands folded like she was waiting for a bus. Asterisk, an engineer with a tablet in hand, started furiously scrolling through the real-time diagnostics. It's perfect, he whispered. He said it louder this time, as if needing to convince himself it's actually perfect. Look at the readouts. This is factory spec. Asterisk, the youngest engineer who'd helped reconnect the cable, stepped back, his face pale with shock. He gave her a helpless shrug, an embarrassed half-dashed smile. Asterisk, the manager, finally found his voice. He stepped forward stiffly, his expression hard to read, a strange mix of humiliation, relief, and grudging respect. Asterisk, how did you even know? He demanded, but not harshly now. His tone was softer, uncertain. We ran every test in the book. Asterisk, as the applause slowly faded. The engineers gathered around the now perfectly running machine, still marveling at its flawless operation. The rhythmic hum filled the space with a calm they hadn't felt in weeks. For the first time in days, there was no shouting, no frantic scrawling of notes on whiteboards, no frantic calls to suppliers or consultants. Just quiet, steady power. Asterisk, the floor manager, exhaled heavily, running a hand down his face. His stern expression softened as he turned toward her. He didn't look like the commanding boss anymore, but like a man relieved of a heavy burden. He took a step forward, extending his hand. Thank you, he said sincerely, voice lower and calmer. You saved the entire project. This machine is critical. We couldn't meet the production deadline without it. She hesitated, wiping her hands on her old uniform before shaking his hand gently. I'm glad it's working, that's all.